let's begin over here. We're up to Daf Kuf Tes Vav, and we're gonna start over here about Kuf Yudalid Amud Sheni, approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom. I just want to mention the number one thing is that we're talking here about karpas, and one of the things that we do in karpas is eat less than a kazayas. It's a very interesting thing that our minig is not to eat a kazayas of karpas, but we make a bar pri adama, and we have in mind that we should not have any. We should not have to make a new bar pri adama for when you eat the morer. And the reason why you eat less than a kazayas, it's interesting, because if you ate more than a kazayas, you would have to make a bar nefashos. Why? Because since you're going to say the Haggadah, the Haggadah is going to be like an interruption. So really, technically, halachically, you would have to say a bar nefashos, and then make a new bar pri adama after you wash for the morer. But then, if we do it that way, you're making 2 bar pri adamas. And that's called making a bracha that you don't really have to. In other words, if there's another way around it, we try to minimize the amount of brachas that we make because they're special. So therefore, in order to solve that problem, we want to make 1 bar pri adama without having the obligation to make a bar nefashos afterwards. And to have that bar pri adama cover the bar pri adama on the morer. So therefore, by karpas, we eat less than a kazayas. So therefore, we don't have to make bar nefashos. And yet it accomplishes that when you do wash, you don't have to make a new bar pri adama for that morer. A fascinating, interesting reason of why we eat less than a kazayas. Then we got into the discussion of having 2 foods, 2 pieces of meat. And 2 cooked foods. One is the shank bone, and one is the shank bone. One we use as an egg. I did mention that there was an opinion that they used. Rav Huna said you could use beets and aruz is rice on the seder plate. I mentioned to Steve yesterday that I once went to a program, I don't know, it was in Tower 41. It wasn't a program, it was part of the building in Miami Beach, where they actually on the last day started serving chalapshas with rice in it. Of course, our custom is not to eat that. And that was prior to them, many years ago, prior to the strict supervision that you need now for Pesach programs. Because only Svardim would get away with rice, and we don't. Okay, so let's begin. Gemara begins, Pshita, it is very simple. We're talking about Heicha de Ika Sha'ar Yirakas. If you have other vegetables to use for karpas, Mavorach Hashar Yirakas, Bar Pri Adama, you should use on that vegetable Bar Pri Adama, for example, potato, Va'achal, and then you eat it. And then you say the Agada, and you go through the matzah, and then and then you make the achilas mara v'achal. That's in a normal case where you have a vegetable. Now the question is heicha deleka elachasa. Let's say you only have lettuce, the stuff that you only have 1 vegetable in your house. You only have the mora vegetable. You only have romaine lettuce, and you're going to have to use that as your karpas. What should you do? So we learned before that Rish Lakish said that technically, if you would eat your romaine lettuce as karpas, you would not be yotza, because mitzvahs tzrichas kavana. In order to be yotza a mitzvah, you have to think about that I'm going to be the yotza a particular mitzvah. I'm going to be yotza marer. When you're eating it as karpas, you don't have an intention to eat it as marer, and therefore it's not used as marer. So technically, you could first use it as karpas, and then use it as marer. So, but that's what Rav Huna said. Amar Rav Huna said, Mavarach miikara amara bar pri adama. First, you have to make it, since you're using this romaine lettuce as your karpas, you make a bar pri adama, like as if it was a potato or something like that. and you eat it for the karpas, and you were not yotzei the mitzvah maror. Why? Because your intention is not to use this romaine lettuce as your mitzvah maror. And then when you're up to you wash and you have the matzah, then you could use the romaine lettuce again for your achilas maror. That's what Rav Huna said. And that perfectly makes sense, because if you hold mitzvahs tzrichas kavana, you were not yotzei, you not fulfilled your obligation by using the romaine lettuce as your karpas. So maskif lo Rav Chisda says, Rav Chisda holds that he also holds mitzvahs tzrichas kavana, but he says, but it's something is wrong here. You're eating the romaine lettuce, and then you're eating romaine lettuce, and then you're not going to be yotzei for maror, and then you're going to eat it again for the mitzvah of maror. It's something is not a hidur mitzvah, so to speak. Maskif lo Rav Chisda la'acha shemile kreise amenu chayzu mevarach lahu. After you first had the maror in the as using it as karpas, and granted you're not yotzei the mitzvah maror, but then you're going to go make another brach on it. That's not nice for the maror. It's almost like I would say that if a guy eats matzah erev Pesach and then eats matzah at night, we said that's not a hidur mitzvah because you're eating matzah erev Pesach for not the mitzvah, and then you eat it again. It's like eating cholent on Friday. So it's not a hidur mitzvah. So therefore, Elamar Chizr, if in case a guy only has romaine lettuce, he has no other vegetable, then you should be yotzei the maror right away. Then first you should make a bracha bar priyadama and alachilas maror, and then eat it. Now you yotzei the mitzvah of maror. And during the meal, eat maror, eat the romaine lettuce without a bracha. Why would you have to eat it again? Because you still need to have two dips you have to have two vegetable dips to get the kids to ask questions. So technically, we would love you to have the matzah, eating matzah first, and then you eat your maror, because it says al matzos umroirim yachluhu. First eat the matzah and then eat the maror. But if a person only has romaine lettuce, then he's really stuck. So what we say, okay, you should eat your maror, have a mind to be yotzei the mitzvah maror during karpas, and during the meal, eat the romaine lettuce again, and that would be like to make the kids ask, because we don't want you to fill yourself up a little bit with romaine lettuce and then later on be mekayim the mitzvah of maror. That was Rav Chisda's opinion, but Rav Huna held differently. B'Surya avdek Rav Huna in Syria. I don't think this means Syria, but I think it means Surah, which means, I think there's a gears on the side, Surah, which is a place in Babel. They paskin like Rav Huna. I guess vegetables wasn't so common. If you only have romaine lettuce, they would use the romaine lettuce as the karpas, and then be yotzei the mitzvah of maror after the washing of the hamotzi. Rav Sheshes prayed Rav Yeshua of the Rav Chisda. Rav Sheshes, the son of Rav Yeshua, in case they only had romaine lettuce, he paskin like Rav Chisda. The hilchas kavas Rav Chisda. Now locha is like Rav Chisda, that if you only have romaine lettuce, you have no other vegetable, then you should be yotzei the mitzvah of maror right away in the beginning of the seder. Next, the Gemara begins. Rav Acha b'rei de Rava mahada shariakas. Therefore, Rav Acha, the son of Rava, would try to find as best as he can other vegetables to use for the karpas. So la'apuke nafshei beplukta. So not get involved in this machlekes of if you're only using romaine lettuce. So he would definitely try to get for his karpas a different type of vegetable. So therefore, you're not involved in this machlekes, what to do in case you only have romaine lettuce. And that's what we do. I explained yesterday that some people have this minhag to use for karpas, that minhag, all sorts of different customs, what to use. Celery and carrots and potatoes, that's what we use. Amar Ravina, Nu Gemara. Amar Ravina said, Amar li Misharshi b'Rav Nasan, Rashashi, the son of Rav Nasan, said, Hachi Amar Hillel. This is what Hillel said. Now, this Hillel is not the Tana Hillel. It's a Hillel the Amoira who appeared many years later. Mishmei the Gemara. He said, Loi nichra, let's say on Seder night, a guy wants to take his matzah and Mara eat it together. Like nichrach, a person should not wrap. Now, nichrach means wrap because in the time, I don't think we make it this way, or svardim, but their matzah was like soft, like a lafa, something like that. So they were able to wrap the matzah around the Mara.
It still is. It still is.
They just still make
it's
it?
soft like pita.
I'd love to see, they have these like Sephardic bakery.
Yeah. It's soft like they keep it, but it gets stale very quickly. So they keep it frozen till the Seder. But and Rabbi Leibowitz and I believe even Rabbi Hershel Schachter said that it's absolutely okay for Ashkenazim to eat it.
To use it, wow.
I know Rabbi Leibowitz had some, and he was going to use it a couple of years ago, and there was a Sephardi in town who didn't have, so he gave him his from the freezer, but he says it's fine.
Very good, interesting. So it's wrappable. That's the point is lichrich. So he says, loy nichrach, a person should not wrap, inish, a man, matzah, the matzah, umorer, bahadei adod v'neichel. On Seder night, don't wrap them together and eat it at one shot. Mishum, because the Svirlam, this Hillel holds matzah bazman hazeh doiraisa. Matzah in nowadays is doiraisa because it says be'erev toichlu matzahs. Umorer in nowadays is rabbanan. When there is no Beis Hamikdash, the mitzvah's Mara is only Rabbanan because Mara was technically only supposed to be eaten only when you have a carbon Pesach. But also Mara the Rabbanan, the Mara that's only a mitzvah the Rabbanan, umvater le matzah da'iraisa, and would nullify the taste of matzah da'iraisa. If they're eating both foods at the same time, the Mara of the Rabbanan mitzvah will nullify the taste of the matzah, and you won't be yotze anything. And then he says, this Hillel, this Amoire Hillel says, even according to the Tanaic opinion, the Tana, that holds that when you eat two mitzvahs at the same time, you could be yotze both at the same time. Hani mili doiraisa b'doraisa. If they're both doiraisa mitzvahs, then you could be yotze both at the same time eating it. Or if they're both eating foods that are chuyev d'Rabbanan, you can eat them both at the same time. Aval doraisa u'drabanan. If one of them is a doraisa and the other one is the rabbanan, also the rabbanan mavatale doraisa. The rabbanan will nullify the taste of the doraisa, and you won't be yotze any mitzvah. So the Gemara says, man tane, who is that Tanaic opinion that holds that you could technically put two foods in your mouth at the same time? The Shamet Lei that we hear that his opinion is mitzvahs ein mavat lezuazu, that mitzvahs do not nullify one from the other. Who is that opinion? So the Gemara says that's the famous Hillel, the Tana Hillel, that we say on Seder night. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, Amru Olav al Hillel, they said about Hillel, Shoyakorcha bevas achas, he would wrap his Pesach, the matzah and Mora at one time, ba'oichlet, al matzah nema, because it says al matzah umroim yachlu. You should eat the Pesach matzah and Mora all at one piece. So he dafka held, he deliberately held that you should eat your Pesach matzah and Mora, and that was only in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when everything that you were eating is a mitzvah daraisa. But says Hillel, since the Hillel the Amora says that even Hillel the Tana would only hold that works in the Beis at the time the Beis Hamikdash worked. But Bezman Hazeh, trying to be yotze both mitzvahs in one shot is not correct, because the matzah Bezman Hazeh the raisa, the rabbanon is the rabbanon, and the rabbanon will nullify the taste of the matzah in your mouth. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Cholken olav chavera al Hillel. The friends of Hillel, his contemporaries, argued at him, and they hold that even when the Beis Hamikdash was around, you're not allowed to eat two mitzvahs deraisas together. They're very strict about it. Even if they were both deraisas, you were not allowed to eat them together. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, I might think you should wrap them all in one thing, and to eat it the way Hillel did it. So that there's a Tana, a first Tana that says, is Hillel correct? Talmud loima. So the pasuk says, al matzos umroim yochluhu. You should eat it, each one separately. That's how they learn. Yochluhu is singular. So eat the matzah, afil zebefnei atzma v'zebefnei. Even if you eat each one separately, it's fine. Wait a second. Rabbi Yochanan said that this Tana holds that you should only eat it separately because mitzvahs mevatla zu. And this Tana seems to agree to Hillel. This Tana is a little ambiguous. First, he says, I might think that Hillel is correct. So we have a pasuk that says you could do what Hillel's doing, but you could also do it separately. So what does he hold? Can you eat two mitzvah diraisas at the same time or not? So that's what maskif la Rav Ashi. If they're so strict and say that you have to eat it separately, then why did this Tana say you could, if you want, eat it separately? They should say you should only eat it separately. Ella Amar Rashi, this Rav Ashi learns the opinion of that Tana, of that Brisa, is not so strict. Hi Tana Hochi Ketana. This is what the Tana of that says. That this Brisa holds that you don't have to be strict like Hillel. You could do either way you want. Maybe I would think that you didn't fulfill your obligation only if you do it. Only if you do it like Hillel, then you're yotze. But if you don't do it like Hillel, you're not yotze. Talmud loima, the pasuk says, "Al matzis umroyim yochluhu." You should eat it on matzis umroyim. That means that you can read it either way. Either eat it all at one as one sandwich, as one wrap, or or you can eat it separately. So you don't have a proof from that brisa that there is a Tana that would hold that you cannot eat it at the same time. But we know Rabbi Yochanan said there is a Tana somewhere that holds you cannot eat it at the same time. So we have two opinions. Hillel holds, let's talk about in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. Hillel holds in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you should eat it both at the same time because that's what the pasuk means according to Hillel. There was another Tana who holds you should not eat them at the same time. Now, who do we pascha like? So now the Gemara says, Hashta, Deloy Itma, we don't know for sure. Hilkasa, Loike Hillel. We don't know if the halacha is not like Hillel, or maybe it is like Hillel. It didn't teach us, maybe it is like Hillel, that you should eat it at the same time. Or maybe the halacha is like the Rabbanim. You have to eat it separately. I don't know what you did in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara gives you what you did in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, and even in our Seder, we do it the similar. First, Mevarach Achilas Matzah v'Ochel, eat Achilas Matzah and you eat it. Like the Rabbanim. You eat them at the same time because mitzvahs mevat lezu azu. Then then you should eat the matzah with the maror without a bracha. To remind yourself that Hillel would hold in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, that was the only way to be mekayim the pasuk. So that's the way the halacha is. One of those things, because Hillel, normally you would paskin like Hillel, the great Tana Hillel, but the Rabbanim disagreed. They held Hillel learned the pasuk incorrectly, that you're supposed to eat the matzah first and then the maror first. So that's why you make a bracha first on the matzah, and then you eat maror, and they eat them both together. I will point out to you a halacha that when you make your bracha on the maror, and when you make a bracha on the matzah, one should try to not so much interrupt talking, because let's do once you make the bracha on the maror, I'm talking about when you make al achilas maror, eat your maror and then right away do the sandwich without interrupting. So your achilas maror should go also on the sandwich, because according to Hillel, the first time that you ate the maror, you were not yotze, because maror has to be eaten together with matzah according to Hillel, and therefore you were not yotze the mitzvah of maror. So therefore, if you're going to interrupt talking about how the maror tastes and where you get the romaine lettuce, when you're going to eat according to Hillel, you're separating the bracha of achilas maror from the real eating of the maror, which is as a wrap, as a sandwich. So therefore, and I think it's an halacha brought that once you make achilas maror, try to eat the maror and try to make the sandwich without interrupting. New Gemara. Now the Gemara comes back to the next thing that you wash before the karpas. So Amar Rab Loza, Amar Rav Ashaya. Rab Loza said in the name of Rav Ashaya that the reason why, probably this is how it comes in. The reason why you wash, when you take the romaine lettuce and you're going to dip it deeply with the whole hand, you're going to really sink it into charoisis as your karpas. So we're talking about a person who only has charoisis. He only has romaine lettuce. Now, the romaine lettuce at the time of Chazal had like a certain poison to it or worm on it. And therefore, they required you to dip it into the charoisis. So because your karpas, you're dipping it into the charoisis and sinking it in, that's why you have to wash urchatz, because we learned kol shetibuli b'mashkin, any vegetable that you dunk it into, dunk is the right word, like Dunkin' Donuts. You dunk it into liquid, any vegetable that you do that to, you have to wash your hands just like you have to wash your hands for bread. Now, why does it you have to wash your hands? So the Rashbam explains, because we're chayish that if you don't wash your hands has a din tumah of a sheni, stam yadayim, anonymous. The default yadayim are sheni. When you touch the mashkem, when you touch the liquid becomes a rishon, and therefore it will make the vegetable into a sheni. And you're eating tamei food, and there's an inyan to eat, even if you're eating chulin, to try to eat tahar food. It's based on a smicha sapsukim of ukdashtem, eat holy foods, even try to eat pure foods. And therefore, you would have to wash your hands, and that's why we're washing our hands Seder night. Because normally, if I'm dipping, let's say, a celery into a little dressing, I'm holding on to the celery, and I'm just touching it with the dressing, so I'm not sticking my hand into the liquid. But since romaine lettuce has this poison to it, when you're holding on to the romaine lettuce, you're not just dipping it in, you're dunking it in. And therefore, you're dunking it in, you're automatically going to make the lettuce tamei if you don't wash your hands. And that's why we wash our hands by Seder night. If that would be the case, technically, you would have to make an al natilas yadayim. But according to Rashbam, that's probably, you would have to make an al natilas yadayim. Our minig is not to make an al natilas yadayim. Amar Papa said, Shmamina, from Abishaya said, Hai chasa, the romaine lettuce, that suppose, again, somebody only has romaine lettuce and he's using it for karpas, we go to Amar Sheni, Tzorech l'shakuye, you have to dunk it. L'shakuye means to dunk it, b'charoisis, mishum kapa, because of kapa. Rashbam says either it's a poison, and therefore this nullifies the poison. The charosis somehow nullifies the poison, or it's a type of worm that if you eat it live, there's no that it would kill it by dunking it into charosis. Eating the worm is not a problem over here because it's not a worm that crawls on that came from somewhere else. It came from the vegetable itself, so it's not the isser of worms over here, but it's an isser of non-health. It's not healthy to eat it. And therefore, that's why they made you dunk it into charosis, because of kappa, because of this worm or poison. The isal kedaitich loitzorch l'shakuye. If Chazal did not require to dunk the romaine lettuce into charosis, the tilas yadayim lameli. Why should you have to wash your hands? If it's enough just to dip it in, you're not going to touch it. If it's like a celery stick and you're just going to dip it into a French dressing, so you're not going to touch the liquid. So the fact is, so if the romaine lettuce doesn't have to be dunked into the charosis, so then why would you have to wash your hand? Most people will take the romaine lettuce and just dip it into the charosis. So the Gemara says that's really not a proof. Really, I will tell you, you don't have to dunk it. In other words, every romaine lettuce has this poison on it. The kappa merecha moyes. just by bringing it near to the charoises will cause the fumes of the charoises to kill the poison, or nullify the poison, or nullify the worm. So therefore, you really don't have to dunk it into charoises. So then, then why did they require you on Seder night to do Netilas Yadayim? Because there are some people that like to dunk into charoises. Dilma mashakile. Maybe you will dunk into charoises. So therefore, they made a chumrah that some people will love charoises and will dunk the whole romaine lettuce into charoises. Therefore, we made you wash for karpas. So that's why we wash for karpas. So technically, the reason probably why we wash for karpas is because maybe if you can't afford another vegetable and you use the romaine lettuce as your karpas, there are some people that are going to dunk the whole because maybe they like the taste or they're nervous about this poison. They're going to dunk the whole romaine lettuce into the karpas, into the charoises, and therefore they're going to touch the charoises and make the lettuce tamei. So therefore you wash. But most people are just dipping it in and using a fork. So therefore, that's why I think that b'zman hazeh, since you're not using romaine lettuce, and some people are using larger vegetables, so you're never touching the liquid itself and using a fork, so we don't wash netilas yadayim. There could be another reason for netilas yadayim is to make the children ask. So in that case, we only the head of the household washes and not everybody else. And that's how my custom is that only I wash, nobody else washes. New Gemara. V'yamar Papa said, "Lo nishe inish mar b'charoises." I guess my wife loves charoises, so but a person should not leave the romaine lettuce into charoises for a very long time. Bilma, because maybe agav chalia de tablin, because of the sweetness of the spices or the or the taste of the spices, mavata le lim rei. It's going to nullify the bitterness of the romaine lettuce or whatever you're using. If you're using endives or something like that, ubeinem, and in order to be yaitzer the mitzvah of mara, you need tam mara. You need to be able to taste some sort of bitterness or something. Veleka, and it's not. If it starts tasting like charoises, then you're not yaitzer the mitzvah of mara. So you have to dip it or dunk it, but just for a second. Now the Gemara continues. Adabre Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda was walking or leading l'Rabbanan Ukva. He was leading him, v'darash, and he was darshan. Maybe they went for a walk somewhere, and and as he's walking, he's teaching a teaching. Rav Chizda said, like what we do, not till yada betibul rishon, you wash your hands by the first, noitil yada betibul sheni. Then you should wash your hands by the second washing. In other words, even though you wash by Kaddish Urchatz, after you do Magid, you have to wash again. So but that could be, Rav Chizda made this teaching anonymously. He didn't say he was talking about the Pesach Seder. So Pashtus, it could be that if a person was eating vegetables and dunked it, and then they brought him a second vegetable, and he never thought that they were going to bring him a second vegetable, he has to wash again. So Amru Rabbanan Kamid Rav Papa. The Rabbanan said this teaching Rav Chizda in front of Rav Papa, and they said it seems that Rav Chizda was Holba Alma Itba. Was talking about it on a regular night. If you eat vegetables dunked twice and you didn't know about it, so then you have to wash twice. If it's on a regular Seder night, Lamelin the Til Sidaim Trei Zimna. Why do you have to wash your hands twice? You washed after Kiddush one time. Why do you have to wash after for Hamotzi? You already washed after Kiddush for the Karpas. So why would you have to wash again? So it must be Rav Chizda was talking about every other night. So the Gemara says, just the opposite. By Pesach's night, you have to be more concerned about washing again. This is what it was said. On a regular Seder night, you have to wash twice. If it's a regular Tuesday night, a regular non-Seder night, Lamali Trei Tebule. Why do you have to have two dippings? Normally people only dip once? I mean, it's not normal to dip something again twice. once you eat vegetables, nobody, has for dessert vegetables. You eat vegetables right after you start your meal, but not twice. So he must be have been talking about Seder night. Elamai hachi itma. So then I'll ask you, Natil Sidayim Trezin Lamnali, then why do you have to do washing twice? If Rav Chisda was talking about a regular Seder night, then why did Rav Chisda say you have to wash twice? You washed again twice. Amrei, so we say the reason why Rav Chisda made a new law that you have to wash twice, because given the boil agata v'halela, since you're going to say the Haggadah and Halal, maybe you're going to forget during that time, and you're going to v'noga, and you can touch a dirty place, and therefore before you wash hamotzi, you should wash again. You see, the order that we have kadesh, urchatz, karpas at the time of the Gemara, it wasn't so clear. Rav Chisda came up with this idea that you have to wash again. After Magid, you should do rachza again. And that's what we do. We do Kaddish, Urchatz, and then we do Yachatz, Magid, and then rachza again. Interesting that the first time you watch is called Urchatz. And it's connected somehow. I'm going to throw out this question, and hopefully someone here can get the answer. When you say Kiddush, the next one, Urchatz. You don't say Urkarpas. It's like almost like the Kiddush and the Urchatz are connected with each other. And we don't call it Rachza. But after Magid, we call it Rachza with a Hey. Why in the first one we're calling it Urchatz? And why in the second one we're calling it Rachza? Something to think about. Amar Rava, another few minutes here. What happens? Amar Rava, Bala Matzah, guy swallows the matzah, Yotza. He's Yotza. In other words, he didn't chew it. He just swallowed it, Yotza. Because the main thing about matzah, it should touch your throat. Bala Mara, but if you swallow Mara, Lo Yotza, you're not Yotza. Why? Because you have to taste some bitterness. And Bala Matzah Mara, if you swallow matzah and Mara at the same time, Idei Matzah Yotza, Idei Mara, Lo Yotza. For the matzah, you were Yotza, but the Mara, you were not Yotza. Because again, if you swallow it at the same time, the matzah touches your throat, but the Mara, you have to taste the bitterness in your mouth. And by just giving it a direct swallow, you're not Yotza the Mara, because they wanted you to feel the bitterness to remind you of a Yamaru as Chayehem, that their lives were embittered. So, but the Mishnah, the bright Rava said, Karacham b'siv ubalim, if you wrapped it, let's say, in a capsule, and you swallowed both of them at the same time, so even the matzah didn't touch your throat because the capsule was like a blockage that blocked it from touching your throat. Afidei matzah nami lo yotza. You were not yotza matzah that way. No Gemara. Amar Rav Shimi bar Ashi. Rav Shimi bar Ashi said that in the old days they used to have mini tables in front of everybody who ate. So matzah lifnei kol echad echad. Everybody should have their own matzah. Mor lifnei kol echad echad. Everybody on their own mini table should have a mor. Why? Because they should be able to eat right away. In other words, as soon as a person watches, you should be able to make the hamotzi and be yotze the mitzvah. You see, normally, if they were having a meal, the head of the household can make a hamotzi, and there could be a delay till one of the participants gets their piece of bread, because there's no chiyuv, there's no mitzvah daraisa to eat that bread. So they allowed you to have a delay. But because on Seder night there's a mitzvah to have matzah and a morah, everybody has to have that morah. So we don't want anybody to have a delay in eating the matzah. So therefore, because everybody at the time of Chazal had their own little tables, Rav Simi bar Ashi said that everybody should have their little matzah in front of them, and they should have morah in front of lifnei kol echad ve'echad, the charoises lifnei kol echad ve'echad. Everybody should have their own charoises. Now, there was a minute now that they would remove the table just right after you start eating. They would remove the table, so the kids start asking. Now, removing the table is a sign the meal's over. Wait, I just ate matzah. So that would prompt the kids to even ask during the meal. We're only accustomed that the kids should ask the manashtana and be done with it. No, when you started your meal, you would make the hamotzi matzah and eat the maror, and then all of a sudden they would remove the table, meal over. And the kid would say, "Dad, we didn't finish the meal." That would prompt them to ask a question. But that That Rav Simi bar Ashi says they don't remove the table before, only in front of the person, the leader of the house who's saying the Haggadah. that he's the person that they remove the table from. That's what Rav Shimi Barashi said. Rav Huna, but nowadays we don't move tables because we have one large table and we have a different eating culture than they did. Rav Huna says, even in the time of Chazal, you don't have to have matzah in front of everybody, Mara. You just the head of the Seder table, on his little table, he would have the matzah and the Mara and the charaisis. You didn't have to have it, but they removed the table from him. Of course, Rav Huna would agree. Part of them moving the table is they would take his table even before they began to eat, so the kids could ask. Now, but nowadays we try to move the Seder plate off to the side, as the Rashbam explains, to get the kids to ask. I don't see this done. I don't know. Here, the Rashbam says today, what we do is take the kara, the Seder plate, and move it off to the side, and that is enough to get the kids to ask. I don't think people do that. What I think people do is just they close the matzah, they close the matzah as a sign of something, to get the kids to ask. But I don't think people lift the Seder plate off. I've never seen that. So the Gemara says, Lama shulchan. Why in the time of Chazal would they perhaps uproot the table? Right? You sat down, you ate your karpas, and now they would remove the table. Why did they do that? So I told you already. The children should recognize something is different and start asking a question. And then the Gemara says a story. Abaya Haba Yosef Kame de Rabba. Abaya was sitting as a young boy in front of Rabba. Rabba was the one who raised Abaya. Chaza, Abaya observed the komadli taka mikamai. They're uprooting the table from Rabba. They just started the Seder. They ate the karbas and they're removing the table from Rabba. Amalu is Abaya, who is an astute young boy. He says, Adayin loy kachilna. We didn't start the meal yet. Asukum akrim taka mikamon. You're removing the table from yourself. Why? Why do you allow that, Rabba? Why the waiter's taking your table? Oh, well, Rabba said, that's a nice, you see, you're smart. I don't have to say the manashtana because you said it for me. In other words, if you have a boy that says the manashtana and he's smart and he understands what he's saying, so the head of the household does not have to say the manashtana because the son said it. So by Abaya demonstrating that he's smart and he can ask questions, so he's the type of boy that if he would say manashtana, then the head of the household does not have to repeat the manashtana, and therefore you could go straight to avodah mayinu. It's not that Abaya did not say the manashtana. Abaya, when he was a small boy, did say the manashtana, but he demonstrated that he's very observant and that he's smart, and he's a smart little boy. He's not just repeating what the Mora in kindergarten told him to say. He understood the manashtana questions, and he even can ask questions on his own. Once you have a child like that, then the head of the household does not have to ask questions. He could go straight to avodah mayinu. But let's say a person doesn't have kids that are of age that are astute. He just has 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds in the house. Then the head of the household, or if it's just him and his wife, has to say the manashtana, because it's very important that the mitzvah tonight is to have somebody ask a question and you answering it. And if there's nobody who has the intelligence to ask their own questions, then the head of the household has to ask questions. So that's why if a person's eating alone with his wife, he has to say the manashtana, because there has to be a question answer in order to be mekayim a mitzvah of igata levincha. Okay. A lot of halacha over here.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's different. Every little line over here is every little line is a new halacha. But it's interesting that they said bola, mora. Mora you have to taste. You know, mora represents when things don't go good in your life. So a person tries to dull it down, but that's not true. If something doesn't go well in a person's life, he has to feel it and then come to the recognition later that it was for his benefit. But you first have to taste it Matzah represents when things are going good. So you don't have to taste that. You just could swallow it. Maror represents when things are not so good. So you have to taste it and understand why God is sending you this lesson. But then you come back to it that it was good. That's the musar from it.
Very nice.
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're almost there. Okay. Good time.